benefits. Joining me now is Representative Patrick McHenry from North Carolina and ranking member of the House Financial Services Committee. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me today. First of all, hope you're staying safe, you and your family. And Congressman, what exactly is lacking from your perspective for these gig economy worker protections in this existing legislation in light of this pandemic?
Well, first of all, thank you. Thanks for having me on. And as you can see, we're all working from home and doing our best right now. In this bill that we worked on for the last 2 weeks to help negotiate, we included gig workers for eligibility for unemployment insurance. I think that was the right thing to do given the nature of this pandemic. What we didn't do is give them the whole suite of options that other employees would get. And I think it's important that we include gig workers and a broader array of the social safety net and options for the same benefits that big company employees and mid-sized company employees get from their jobs. And I think that needs to be offered in this next round of regulations that are written around the bill we passed on Friday.
Congressman, obviously the need for these kinds of gig workers has really accelerated during this pandemic. Just today, we're learning that Walgreens and Postmates are expanding their on-demand delivery services to thousands of stores nationwide. Do you hope these kinds of protections do continue after this pandemic? While we've seen so many conversations around legislation like AB 5 in California, for example, is this pandemic what was necessary really to push the conversation forward for these gig economy workers?
Well, look, AB 5 is an absolute disaster for California workers and the California economy, for sure. What I think we need to add, and what I've sent a letter to the Treasury Secretary and the chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission, is that we need to change the rules so that gig workers get the same economic benefits, the same options for equity, like stock grants or options that companies give their employees, and specifically what companies usually give their higher level employees. I think all employees should have this benefit and get the upside equity for the contribution they're making to their company. Look, we're going to have a great American comeback from this. We will. We'll rally. Once we get our economy back rolling again, people get to emerge. And we want to make sure that everyone gets the benefits of the growth of our economy. And I think that's the best counter to what's happening right now in the larger political debate on our economic system.
And for these gig economy based companies like Uber, like DoorDash, they do have these opposing forces where they want to keep prices down for consumers, which is kind of against this idea of providing drivers and these gig economy workers with more benefits and paying them more. Do you think these kinds of companies will have the incentives themselves to provide these protections, or does it truly require legislation both from a state level and also from a federal level?
No, I think we need to give the companies this opportunity to give their gig workers this action, this equity action that direct employees normally get access to. And I think with that incentive out there, that regulatory change, I think you'll have more gig workers get this option. I think this would be a great answer to those that are protesting right now that they're not getting paid enough by Instacart, for instance. If those same folks that are gig workers get the upside potential of the growth of that stock that they're helping grow that company and thereby growing the equity of that company on the stock exchange. So I think this would be a good addition to the suite of options that gig workers should be granted.
There's already conversations about this phase 4 of the stimulus package. House Speaker Pelosi said this week that she would like it to include more direct payments to Americans, spending on infrastructure, in addition to these additional rights and benefits for workers. What are you most interested in getting passed in this phase 4 legislation?
Well, let's see how phase 3 works. We've passed 3 big bills in a month's time in Congress, 3 massive bills spending nearly $3 trillion. The bill that we just passed on Friday, and by the way, it's Tuesday, the bill we passed on Friday spent $2.4 trillion. That's the total cost to that bill. Let's see how that works before we start rushing for a bunch of Washington politicians trying to get action for themselves or for their pork barrel projects. Let's see how this bill actually works before we go to the next phase. If we need the next phase, for sure, I'll be engaged in that. But we need to make sure that this is having the proper impact on average, everyday Americans and getting people back to their normal daily lives.
That's a good point to kind of see how that shakes out. But as a ranking member of the House Financial Services Committee, you know better than anyone else how critical of a time this is for a different financial services body, whether it's the US Treasury or the Fed. The Fed has offered hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of stimulus, in terms of buying assets and that sort of thing. What do you think is the most prudent step for the Fed right now, especially in light of what the US government is doing in terms of their stimulus?
Well, I give Jay Powell, Chairman Powell, and the Federal Reserve very high marks in their initial response. What they've done over the last 3 weeks is flat out extraordinary. They've been quite responsive to the needs of the market and to Main Street, and ensuring that those marketplace financial products continue to work so that Main Street can still have the lending that they need to get by. I think that's been very sharp. Now we have the Exchange Stabilization Fund with the Treasury, and Treasury Secretary Mnuchin now has the power to put that money to work with the Federal Reserve to ensure that our marketplace continues to work so that average everyday products continue to function. And so I think what we need from Treasury and the Fed is continued action to reassure the market and to ensure that large-scale piece of money that we've given the Treasury, $454 billion, to backstop the market, put that money to work. And I think once these facilities get stood up, I think that will give greater assurance to large, medium-sized, and small businesses alike. That's what we need right now, is that action.
We appreciate your time today, Congressman. That's Representative Patrick McHenry from North Carolina and a ranking member of the House Financial Services Committee. Thanks again for your time, and again, stay safe.